Sipping a glass of wine, she stood up from the couch again, almost trampling the carpet as she paced around the living room, waiting to hear the sound of his car in the driveway outside. The children were at home, in their rooms, doing homework. Dinner was in the oven, ready to serve as soon as it came in, but the conversation that was to be had after dinner scared her to death. Walking into the kitchen, she was ready to pour another glass, but stopped herself. Closing her eyes, she took a deep breath, trying to force her hands to stop shaking. If not his hands, then his tears were trying to escape. What she was about to tell her husband could destroy their marriage. But the time has come to be honest, first of all, with yourself. Hearing the sound of a car pulling up outside, she smoothed out her favorite dress and quickly checked herself in the mirror, waiting for him to appear at the door. She waited at the front door, ready to hug and kiss him as she did every evening. Although the children were already in high school, she still worked part-time, preferring to be home when they left in the morning and returned in the afternoon. "Hello, honey," her husband said, smiling at her with the same smile he always saved for her. Throwing the bag away, he hugged her tightly. Her emotions almost took over when she returned him with an equally tight hug. "Hello, dear. How was your day?" "Same trash, different day." She chuckled as that was his usual response. But she knew he loved his job. He had been a mechanic since leaving school, but now became a regional manager in charge of a group of shops on the west side of the city. When he kissed her on the lips, he never limited himself to a quick or formal kiss. Even after 15 years of marriage, his passion for her remained unchanged. This made the upcoming conversation even more difficult. Her husband loved her with all his heart, adored their daughter and son, and was loved and adored by his friends and family. Putting his arm around her waist, he led her to the kitchen, sniffing at the same time. "Are you making lasagna?" "My signature recipe, only for my teddy bear." She called him that because he had a pretty hairy chest, he grew a beard, and, well, he kept her warm like a hibernating bear when they were in bed. She screamed as he squeezed her tightly and kissed her lips again. "Thank you, honey. You know how much I love your lasagna. Still not sure what you're putting in there." He looked into her green eyes. Giggling, she slapped him on the shoulder. "Stop talking nonsense and go wash your face before dinner." "Yes, dear, just one thing." Before she could run away, he hugged her again, planting another kiss on her lips. She answered him. She always liked kissing him. "This will last for the next few minutes." Sighing as he left, she took the pan of lasagna and garlic bread out of the oven and a bowl of salad out of the refrigerator. Calling the children over for dinner, their daughter, Chloe, appeared first, setting the table without prompting. Even though she was only 13 years old and sometimes capricious, she helped around the house, knowing that this was the only way to earn pocket money. Her 11-year-old son, Charlie, followed her a few minutes later, sitting down at the table and continuing to play on his portable gaming console. Chloe made a remark about his idleness. Fortunately, there was no quarrel, since Charlie did not listen to her. Her husband, Mark, came in as she was setting the table. He was wearing a simple t-shirt and shorts, but she couldn't help but look him up and down like she did every day. She knew how handsome he was since most of her friends thought the same. He is already 40, and with age he has become more and more attractive. She sometimes wondered why he was still with her, given the underlying problem in their marriage. She knew that if they separated, he would not remain lonely for long. As they helped her set the table, they exchanged casual conversations about their day, both parents showing a sincere interest in their children's lives. Their daughter was now in high school, and her life was filled with the usual teenage dramas. Their son was still in elementary school and enjoyed going to class every day. Mark spoke briefly about his day, still wanting to work in the workshop, but the high salary and responsibility for managing things made up for this desire. Her husband and children cleared the table while she went into the living room to rest, and Mark came out carrying her a glass of wine. "Thank you," she said, smiling at him. A few minutes later, she heard laughter in the kitchen. Her husband probably told funny stories to the children, whether about the events of the previous day or simply making things up to make them laugh. Sitting down next to her, he put his arm around her shoulders, the children settled into their chairs, and they spent a couple of hours together as a family until their son went off to play on his game console and their daughter wanted to hang out with her friends. When the husband and wife were alone, Katie took the remote control and turned off the TV. "Mark, we need to talk." She felt intense, realizing how that might sound. She knew that most conversations that started with those four words sometimes led to broken hearts, anger, blame, and other troubles. Turning to him, she looked into his face and saw concern. He took a deep breath before meeting her eyes. "Speak, honey. What happened?" He sounded so casual, but she knew his heart was beating like crazy. But when he took her hand in his, she almost burst into tears. She could have asked for a divorce, but he still sensed her nervousness and wanted to calm her down, as he always did throughout their life together. Taking a deep breath, she drained her glass of wine, placed it on the table next to the sofa, and met his gaze again. "Mark, I love you." "I love you too, honey. You are my sun and my stars." She leaned over and kissed him on the cheek. He told her this almost every day. She knew how much he loved her. He was more devoted to her as a husband than any other man she had known, even more than her own father, and even more than his father had been to his mother. "Mark, I need to confess something. For a long time, many years, probably most of my life, I always felt a little different. I wasn't sure what it was, but something was wrong in my mind. I don't know how to explain it." He squeezed her hand, which made her smile. "Take your time, Catherine," he said softly, although the use of her full name indicated that he understood the gravity of the moment. "Just one question. You don't want to leave me, do you?" "God, no, not at all." "Okay, then I'm all ears. We have all night, honey." "Mark, I've been seeing a therapist for about 6 months now." "Oh, I'm sorry, dear, but I didn't know how to explain it because it was very personal. But I needed help to figure out my problem. It took a lot of discussion with her, but I can finally admit what my problem is. And because of this problem, it will affect our relationship in the future. And what's most painful is, and the most painful thing is that I will leave the decision in your hands, because there will be things that I will no longer be able to do. I've never felt comfortable doing them most of my life." He turned to her, using his thumb to wipe away the tears that began to roll down her cheeks. "Honey, I hate seeing you like this. You know that." She took a deep breath. "Mark, I'm still so drawn to you that it's funny. It's been like this since the day we met. You are the only man I have ever felt any sympathy for. I was 22 when we met, and before I met you, I had never felt anything for men. I honestly thought that before we met, something was wrong with me. I didn't like women because I wasn't attracted to women either." "Well, I'm definitely attracted to you, honey. I think you look absolutely stunning right now. Are you in a bikini with your current figure? I'll need a gun to keep all the men away." Giggling, she playfully slapped his shoulder. "Be serious, Mark." Raising his hands in mock surrender, he smiled. Okay, I understand." "Mark, it will be difficult further. I wasn't a virgin when I met you, but I never enjoyed sex. I have never experienced what could be called sexual desire. I thought I felt this way about you. I was attracted to you and thought sex was just something couples did. But I've never had the need or desire to have sex, not with you or anyone else. I could go my whole life without feeling the need or desire to have sex, and now I can confidently say that I could live the rest of my life without it. It took a long time to understand what was going on. Well, it's wrong to say something is wrong. It just took a while to give my problem a name." "What is this problem?" "I am what they call an asexual, dear. I have romantic feelings for you. I love you so much and find you attractive. But I never felt the urge to have sex my entire life. I'm having sex now because I want to please you. I wanted children, so it was necessary to have sex with my husband, but I could easily live the last 10 years without him. I only did this because I love to see you happy." She saw that he was upset by her words, that his wife did not feel sexual desire for him. But it wasn't his fault. There was not a single man on the planet who would excite her. It was just something she didn't feel. She didn't need sex. She didn't want it. I never wanted to and never will. Looking into his eyes, she saw that he was lost in his thoughts. What made her smile was that his body was turned towards her and he was holding her hands in his. Finally, he took a deep breath, caressing her cheek with one of his hands. This simple gesture brought tears to her eyes again. "So what should we do, Katie?" "I don't know," she replied softly, "but I know that you will want to have sex with your wife, but I can't subject myself to that anymore." She squeezed his hand. "I do feel pleasure with you, I promise you that, but I don't feel any pleasure from it. I could live my whole life without one, and it wouldn't bother me. I want to remain your wife, but I know that you, as a 40-year-old man, will not want your sex life to end now. But I can't have sex with my wife knowing that she doesn't want it. I will feel like a rapist if I insist on this." "No," she cried, hugging him tightly, and was relieved when he hugged her back. "Never, dear. Never, never, never. I gave myself to you because I love you, not out of a sense of duty. But," stroking her back, he shushed her softly. Closing her eyes, she took a deep breath and tried to relax. "What should we do, honey?" he asked quietly. "Come with me to your next therapy session. My therapist wants to talk to you, explain more about my condition, and then we can discuss our next steps. Don't you want to leave me? I want to grow old with you, darling. I'm afraid that you will want to divorce me." "Never," he whispered. "You are my sun and my stars. We'll grow old together, honey. Just the thought that we won't be close anymore. I know it's not fair, but I have to be honest with myself, and that means being honest with the love of my life." He hugged her for a long time until the questions were over, or he was simply drowning in his thoughts. She just gave him too much. She knew that he would be heartbroken to hear that his wife was comfortable never having sex again. She was undoubtedly thinking of other things as well. Maybe she is having an affair. She knew he would think about it now. But the thought of cheating on the man she loved, the very thought of it disgusted her. On the other hand, what her therapist suggested would mean a minor change to their marriage vows if they agreed. The evening had been emotionally draining for both of them. She'd been on pins and needles for a couple of weeks now, and the idea that she should now relax didn't work. As she undressed before getting into bed, she knew that wearing something sexy that turned her husband on would be unfair to him. So she put on a t-shirt over her panties. It was one of his t-shirts, so it was long enough to cover her buttocks. Laying down in bed next to him, he turned off the light and immediately pulled her close to him. He must have felt hot tears falling onto his shoulder as she held him tighter than ever. "Everything will be okay, honey," he whispered. "We will get through this together." Pausing, he added, "I guess that explains why we didn't have sex." "I'm sorry," she whispered, relieved when he immediately hugged her tighter. "Katie, you were dealing with something important. While I was storing up, well, my disappointment, if only I had known. Secrets are not good for a marriage." "I know. This is why you will come with me to the next session. No more secrets, I promise." Having received what she had wanted to say for so long, she slept all night like a baby in her husband's arms. Waking up in the morning, clinging to him, she felt his excitement and immediately felt guilty. She experienced this feeling almost every morning when she woke up, but she sighed as she remembered the confession she made last night. Then she felt him kiss her on the cheek. "Good morning, honey." "Good morning, dear." This is fine. Hugging and kissing. Now I feel loved in the arms of my husband, but I never have a natural desire to be physical, Mark. Never? I had about half a dozen boyfriends before you, Mark. I never felt anything for them like I felt for you. The sex was terrible. I hated every moment. I have learned to find pleasure in it with you because I love you so much, and because you put all your love for me into our intimacy, but I can no longer trust expose yourself to this. We'll find some way, honey. We are a team. She rolled over and kissed him. "I love you, darling. Please never doubt it." "I don't doubt it at all." Getting out of bed, her husband went to the shower first, after which she followed him. Dressed, they helped the children get ready for school. Mark always left before the children, and she had to go to work by 9 a.m., so she left no later than 3 p.m. Walking him to the door, she hugged him tightly, as she did every morning, and kissed him, as always, with love. No formal cheek kisses. She loved her husband and wanted to show it in every way available to her. She was surprised when he returned home on Friday evening a little earlier than usual, and her parents arrived no more than 15 minutes later. As soon as they walked through the door and said they would be babysitting, she looked at her husband and smiled. "Date night," he said. "Although you look amazing as always, we are going to dinner and dancing. Give me some time. I need to take a shower. Get your hair done." "Honey, it's okay. We don't have a reservation, but we're going to your favorite restaurant." She kissed him again. "I'll be ready as soon as possible." Her father most likely asked him if he was in trouble after hearing Mark laugh, while his mother asked his father when she was going to have dinner and dancing. She was already in the bathroom before he answered. When she finished showering, Mark did the same before they both started getting dressed. He didn't take up too much of her time, giving her the opportunity to do her hair and makeup in peace. When she finished, she did a little pirouette, noticing how Mark's eyes lit up. Walking up to her, he took her hand and told her parents that they would be back at a reasonable time. After kissing her kids goodbye, she noticed Mark getting ready to drive, which told her he wasn't planning on drinking too much. She herself decided to limit herself to 1 or 2 glasses of wine. The food at her favorite restaurant was delicious, as always. The conversation went easily, as always. After 15 years of marriage and 18 years of dating, they could still talk for hours about anything that came to mind. Neither of them wanted to bring up the topic they'd discussed earlier in the week until she finally asked, "Does this evening have anything to do with what I told you earlier?" "This evening is just to take my wife out on a date and show her that I still love her no matter what." "Mark, I think you're almost too understanding on this matter. I didn't fully understand what you told me last week, so I did the smart thing and did some reading on the subject. However, I decided to save most of the questions until we met with the therapist together. Still on the agenda for next Tuesday." "Yes, Dr. Fraser, or rather Amelia, knows you're coming. She'll explain my sexuality better than I can, and then we'll start discussing possible steps. I'm afraid to ask." She squeezed his hand, smiling at him warmly. "All your questions will be resolved on Tuesday afternoon, dear. I promise. Can I ask a frank and perhaps rude question?" "You can ask me anything." "Well, when we were intimate, you still, well, I got excited. I may not have the desire to have sex, Mark, but you could still touch a chord in me in a way that made my body react naturally. And at that moment, I wanted to give myself to you. It's biology and psychology working together. It's still a little unclear to me. You never made it clear that you were uncomfortable, and that made me feel." She squeezed his hand again. "Mark, dear, I promise you one thing. You never hurt me. You never forced me to do anything I didn't want to do for you. The problem is me and me alone. Trust me, there is a way to overcome this. Amelia will explain everything." He didn't take her to a club, but he did take her to a place that played music that she could dance to. Holding her in his strong arms, she pressed her head against his chest and closed her eyes, almost feeling his heart beating as he gently rubbed her back. Any observer would have seen the married couple still deeply in love with each other. She also felt his arousal and felt another pang of guilt. There was still a part of her brain that wanted to give herself to him physically, but every year it became more and more difficult. Returning home at a reasonable hour, the children were already asleep. Her father was dozing in a chair, and her mother was wide awake watching the evening news. They walked the parents to the car, thanking them for agreeing to watch the children at the last minute. The parents waved their gratitude, assuring the couple that they would always be happy to look after the children at any time. The weekend went by as usual. The children played sports games on Saturday morning. She took Chloe to netball. He took Charlie to the football game. They would meet for lunch after the games were over and decide what to do next. Since it was closer to the middle of the year and winter, they decided to return home and stay warm. On Sunday morning, lying in bed with him, snugly wrapped in the blanket as the night was decidedly cold, she remembered the years when they had often made love on Sunday mornings after spending Saturday evenings together. She wondered about the last time they had made love, let alone on a Sunday morning. She knew that her husband still madly loved and desired her. Expensive? Yes. Do you need to, do it yourself? It was actually a relief for her that he laughed. Well, since everything has slowed down lately, I often find myself forced to do this. Luckily, I'm a real master at this. When do you do this? Usually in the shower in the morning. I have a very good imagination. Are you thinking about me? Most of the time. He then began to tickle her, not allowing her to ask any more questions about who else he might be thinking about, only stopping when she screamed that she was about to wet herself. He said something rather rude about it, which made her laugh out loud, and she playfully slapped him on the shoulder to make him behave. When she calmed down, clinging to him again, he added, "It's okay, honey. We will get through this. Do you want to have sex with me now?" Honestly, she nodded, knowing that he would feel her nod. "Honey, you are my wife. I am as attracted to you today as I was the day we met. I always loved making love to you. So yes, I want sex with you right now. I wanted sex last night, the day before yesterday. The night you told me your secret. Yes, it killed my libido a little for a few hours. But I can't help it, honey. You are an amazing woman, and your husband is still crazy about you." She burst into tears in his arms. He kissed her gently and calmed her down. All she could do was sob and repeat how much she loved him. "Forgive me," she whispered, burying her head in his neck. "Like I said, that's what you feel, honey. There's nothing you can do about it. I'm guessing it's something in your brain, some kind of chemical processes." Come to think of it, he had been even more affectionate with her since that night. He'd always been a romantic, wearing his heart on his sleeve when it came to her, but now it was almost like a reminder that no matter what, he wasn't going to leave her. There was a good mood in the house. Even their usually moody teenage daughter noticed the happy atmosphere in the house and interacted with her parents without causing a loud scene. Monday went by normally, but she didn't sleep well that night, spending half the night thinking about the consequences of her meeting with her therapist the next day. She knew that her husband could not remain celibate for the rest of his life. It wouldn't be fair to him. He was a 40-year-old man in the prime of his life, charming, handsome, and it was obvious that his body was still functioning perfectly. Despite her lack of desire, she could admit that he was always great in bed. She wanted to feel loved. She felt love, but it was something else, not sex. Sitting in the waiting room, she felt her husband's presence next to her as she played with her phone, feeling the familiar arm around her, and pressed herself against him. "Everything will be fine," he assured her. Amelia Fraser appeared at the door of her office. After introducing herself to Mark, Katie didn't miss the fleeting glance the therapist gave her husband from head to toe. She felt a brief surge of jealousy. She was always jealous when some woman appreciated him. Mark found it quite funny when she made comments about those who were clearly interested in him. In response, he always generously showered his wife with compliments, making her smile or blush. When they sat down together, after being offered something to drink, she drank a cup of tea and her husband a cup of coffee, and the conversation passed on light topics until they finally came to the point of their visit. She sat quietly as Amelia briefly explained her sessions with Catherine and, with her permission, went into detail about some aspects of their conversations. Catherine's most important concern, besides understanding herself, is to make sure that you do not suffer from the consequences of her therapy. Now that Catherine can finally accept her sexuality, the question arises as to how this will affect your marriage and, in particular, your sexual relationship. I understand you two spoke last week, and Catherine explained her lifelong lack of desire for sex and how you are the only man she has ever felt even a hint of sexual attraction to. This is true. Are you still sexually attracted to your wife? God, yes. I have loved her for almost 18 years, and I have wanted and wanted her for just as long. If I asked you to have sex right now in front of me, would you agree? I would only agree if she was up for it too, but I would have sex with her in the middle of the CBD if she wanted. How did you feel when she confessed to you? Be completely honest. Catherine needs to hear this. Probably pain. Hearing that your wife doesn't really want you sexually is like a punch to the stomach. I know she is in love with me, which was a relief that she still loves me, but sex is an important part of any relationship, so I immediately wondered how we would continue. I don't want her to force herself to have sex with me. I said that in this case I feel like some kind of rapist. Katie said she gives herself to me, but that means I just take all the time. No, you give yourself to me too, Katie objected softly, already dabbing her eyes with a napkin. I think I'm just confused, Mark continued. I want to have sex with my wife. I would have sex with her every day. I love her, and besides all the romantic things I love to do for her, sex is the most intimate way to show your love to each other. But I can't do this if I know that she is forced to do this for me. Have you considered divorcing your wife? He grabbed her hand, squeezing it gently. I'm not ready to give up so quickly. I know that people get divorced for less significant reasons, but I just don't know what else to do. How often do you satisfy yourself? The question made him laugh, causing his wife to chuckle. The question was asked so directly that his reaction was natural. Well, even though some people think my sexual activity should have slowed down a long time ago, I still do it at least once a day, usually in the morning. He does it in the shower, Katie added. Are you still sexually attracted to your wife? Hell yeah. Look at her, Amelia. She's beautiful. I know she knows it too. Here is a more difficult question. Do you look at other women? Of course, but never when I'm with Katie. It would be disrespectful. There's nothing wrong with just looking around when I'm alone. But I would barely be able to talk to other women, let alone much more. I am married. But if a pretty woman walks by, I can at least glance at her. Is sex important to you in a relationship? I think sex is important to most people in relationships. I've read enough horror stories about people stuck in what they call dead bedrooms, where one or both partners lose their sex drive and become roommates rather than lovers. When was the last time you and your wife had sex? He glanced at her. She squeezed his hand and nodded. 3 months ago, at least, he answered quietly, feeling sadness, almost defeat, in his voice. Who usually initiates sex? I always initiate, he admitted. I think I understand why now. Amelia stopped asking her questions as she looked through her notes. Katie knew what would happen next. They discussed this for several weeks. She had come to accept this as the best compromise, but knowing how much her husband loved her, she wasn't sure he could accept it. Clearing her throat, she turned to her therapist again. Mark, your wife and I have discussed various solutions to this problem. I directly suggested divorce so that you could find a woman who matches your sexuality, orientation, and libido. Whatever you call it, your wife is a heteroromantic, but she doesn't feel the desire for sex. This is all. I know you love your wife as much as she loves you, but as you said, sex is an important part of a relationship, and I can only imagine that the longer you go without sex, the more resentment can build, and your relationship may begin to fade. I don't want a divorce, Katie whispered. I don't want to either, Mark added, but I don't know what we should do now. We considered many options, but in the end, the decision was quite simple. You will continue to have a loving, romantic relationship with your wife, and your sexual needs will be met outside of that relationship. What? He asked, confused. I'll find you lovers, honey, Katie said. He turned to her, opening and closing his mouth several times before finally asking, Are you serious? This is treason. No. I can no longer fulfill one of my responsibilities as a wife and partner, and I cannot allow my husband to be deprived of sex because of my own feelings. I cannot agree to divorce the person I still love. I cannot allow the destruction of a loving home. We'll get through this, Mark. Mistresses. Yes, I'm talking about mistresses because I can't let you sleep with one woman too often, otherwise you might fall in love with her. Honey, you're talking about me moving beyond our marriage. I need time to think about it. She made sure he met her gaze. Mark, this isn't going to be some random adventure in a hotel room. We will choose this woman together. She will be invited to our bedroom. I will be by your side all the time. But your lover won't be here just to be used. We will treat her with love and respect, and we will make sure that she does not feel cheap sharing our bed. It won't be just an act of sex. His eyes blinked in surprise at her words. So you've really thought this through? He finally asked. It was actually Catherine's idea, Amelia replied. She wants you to keep having sex, Mark, but she doesn't feel like she can do it anymore. She still wants to feel your love and everything else. Kisses, embrace, sleep in your arms, date nights, those little romantic gestures you do every day, it will all still be intimate, but the physical act of sex. I need time to think, he said quietly after a long pause. Of course, Amelia replied, and if you need any further advice, call me. But as you already suggested, talk to those you trust. Their advice may be unexpected, but there is nothing wrong with that. On the way home, they stopped to get dinner to go, and she noticed that her husband was quieter than usual, although she couldn't blame him for that. But what pleased her was that he never let go of her hand, one of the many benefits of driving a car with an automatic transmission. With all the modern conveniences of a car, he could operate it with just one finger. Stopping the car in the driveway, he put it in park, raised the handbrake, and looked at her. I love you, Catherine. Always have and always will. She kissed him. It was the only way to answer without bursting into tears again. It was Thursday evening. Once every 2 weeks, he would meet up with his best friends for a couple of beers and a few games of darts at the local club. It was a tradition he had maintained for years, and Katie had always approved of it, understanding that he needed time to rest. She herself did the same with her friends once every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. Sitting at the table with a beer, Mark was naturally quieter than usual, since it had been just over a week since their meeting with the therapist where he had learned about his wife. From then on, he continued to show his love for her as always. He was still crazy about her. She still snuggled up to him every night. They were still kissing passionately as always. Okay, buddy, what's going on? Mike asked. Best friend for over 20 years, someone he could rely on in any life situation. You're not usually this quiet, and there's clearly something on your mind. Mark looked at the faces of the 3 men he trusted with his life. I don't quite know how to explain it. Problems with your wife? Brad suggested, with slight smiles and chuckles from the others. Yes, but not in the way you think. The 3 exchanged glances. Damn, she's not cheating on you, I hope? Dave asked worriedly. Shaking his head, Mark replied, No, guys, it's not cheating. A completely different problem. Well, she's been seeing a therapist for a while now and admitted that she feels a little different. The 3 friends looked at each other again. Is she gay now? Dave asked, and it wasn't a joke. Although all 4 were still happily married, many knew of husbands who had discovered that their wives were cheating on them, and 1 or 2 had even discovered that their wives had started falling for women after decades of marriage. Not surprisingly, the 3 men looked worried, speculating that their friend might be the first in their small group to face divorce. Mark smiled. No, she's not into women, doesn't change, nothing like that. He paused, considering his words. Basically, she has a certain condition, let's call it that, and the result of this is that she no longer wants to, well, have a relationship with her husband. But what worries her most is what she proposed as a solution. Friends understood what he was talking about. Even though women think that men constantly discuss their sex lives, This is not true, especially if they are happily married. Mike asked the safe question. What did she suggest? Mark chuckled nervously, scratching his cheek. Well, she basically suggested to me, because of how she feels, and this has been going on her whole life, that she take a lover or two to satisfy certain needs. Many would have expected his friends to chuckle in understanding, like, yeah, he got the green light. But all three knew how much Mark loved his wife. Their marriage was considered incredibly strong. Catherine rarely interacted with other men unless they were also married. She never flirted with anyone other than her husband. No one would tolerate it if one of them cheated on the other. This is a serious proposal, Brad noted. It is, and that's all I've been thinking about since last week. Catherine suggested this to me because there is a part of our relationship that we can no longer satisfy. Did she talk to anyone else about this? Your wives will find out, so if they mention it, we know there will be rumors. We agreed that this would not be kept secret for too long, which is why I am discussing it with you now. Honestly, I don't know what to do. I love my wife, but the thought of never being intimate with her again. Is this one of those new sexual states or something? Dave asked. Yeah, something I've never heard of before. He sighed, running his fingers through his hair. Mike immediately asked him to wait and returned with a strong drink for him, giving him a friendly pat on the shoulder. It's a shame for both of us, especially for her, because I know she feels like less of a wife, even a woman. But I know I can't live the rest of my life without being intimate with someone in the way that most couples enjoy. You're being vague, but we understand, friend, Mike said. So, Catherine suggested that you, sleep with someone else because of her condition. Yes, and I'm sure a lot of guys would be thrilled to have that opportunity. But I love my wife. I made vows in front of our friends and family. She also made vows, and because of her condition, she feels like she's breaking the contract, so to speak, so she's giving me permission to meet certain needs outside of the marriage. Do you have any idea how this would work? Brad asked. We haven't discussed this in detail yet, since I haven't given my consent yet. I wanted some advice. I talked to my parents. They were quite surprised. They didn't quite understand her condition when I tried to explain. But I also found out that my parents are still doing intimate things. He chuckled and added, that's something I honestly didn't want to know, but it turns out they're still in love. Into a friend. He felt some relief after talking to his friends as he stood outside later in the evening, waiting for his wife to pick him up. She arrived a few minutes later, he sat in the passenger seat, kissed her as usual, and then they drove home, holding hands the whole way. After taking a shower before bed, he, as always, lay down next to her, and she, as usual, snuggled up to him. An arm wrapped around her, she gently stroked his chest, and he was lost in his thoughts. Do you have anyone in mind? He finally asked. Someone I know, trust, and love, darling. Who is this? My best friend. It made him almost sit up in bed. You mean Julia? Feeling her nod, he asked. Are you sure? She is divorced, has been single for 2 years, feels lonely, and needs to be loved. She said she would take tests first. Oh, so, you mean? She's on birth control. I want you to enjoy sex with her as much as you enjoy sex with me. I thought about this for a long time, dear. We'll go on a date on Friday evening. On Saturday, you will take us both, and then we will return home, and you will make love. I will be in bed with you to share this experience. Julia already knows about this. Feeling her squeeze, she added, I'm not limiting you to sex once a week, Mark, but I think it will be a little more planned initially. Spontaneous sex, at least for now, is not for us. Julia, he asked, not hiding his surprise. It's either her or my sister. I thought you would prefer someone outside the family. Your sister really looks like you. I'll probably call her by your name. I don't think she'll be offended. I was going to propose to her, but I wasn't sure how you would feel about it. She's younger than me and still very attractive. Well, she's lonely too. She giggled as he hugged her a little tighter. It's a little weird, he admitted. I thought about trying dating apps, but I wasn't sure how I would feel bringing a stranger here. Therefore, I immediately abandoned the idea of using sex for money. I didn't want you to have meaningless sex. Julia is your friend, just like mine. Yes, it will be embarrassing to add sex at first, but once I pitched the idea to her, I wouldn't say she agreed right away, but she understands exactly what's going on and is willing to try it for both of us. After a pause, she added, "Besides, she also needs to make love, and I've told her a lot about your skills in bed." Thank you, I guess. So what about next Saturday? You need sex, honey. I know I'm needed. Next Friday, we'll spend the evening together, and on Saturday, Julia will join us, and then you can enjoy time with her. And will you be by my side? Mark, I'll cuddle up to you like I do every night after you do this with Julia. And Julia? He will stay with us. I said it wouldn't just be sex, and I'm not going to kick your lover out immediately after the act. He was silent for a moment before he said quietly, "It's still a little weird." The fact that she laughed made him feel relieved. His wife agreed that it was strange, but it was the best way to proceed. She assured him of her love and that she wanted this for him. Not being able to give herself completely to him, she knew that there would be more than one woman who would be happy to share his bed. He understood that this would be a serious test for their marriage and hoped that it would not end in disaster. The next week went just like all the other weeks of their marriage. The morning was busy getting ready for work. The children were getting ready for school. He worked his usual 8 to 10 hours. She worked for 6 to 7 hours. The children seemed happy and well-behaved. They communicated with friends and family. The evenings were spent cuddling in each other's arms on the couch, and then they went to bed. What changed for him was Wednesday night's request. Lying next to her in bed, pressed against her back, he couldn't help but become aroused by his wife. He was grateful that he was still so attracted to her. To his surprise, she turned to him, kissed his cheek, then undressed completely. She didn't do anything else. "You were there for me right now, sweetheart, and you were there for me then. I didn't take my eyes off you. We will get through this together. We will do this more often, dear. Even when you take care of yourself, I will be there for you. So, we'll take a shower together tomorrow morning. Most of the time, yes, it's not difficult for me to be naked next to you, and you make me feel beautiful every day." On Friday, a real surprise awaited him. This morning, like yesterday, she was by his side as he took care of himself. Although they kissed the whole time, her hands caressed his upper body, and when they went to the shower, they did it again. The evening before their date, they also took a shower together. Dinner took place at one of their favorite restaurants. They held hands almost all the time, except for those moments when they ate, constantly smiling at each other and rejoicing at how he made her laugh with his stories. After dinner, they went dancing, and he couldn't contain his excitement as he held his wife in his arms. "I would be disappointed if I didn't feel it," she whispered. "Julia will be a happy woman tomorrow evening." "How much did you tell her?" he asked, feeling a little awkward. "Well, I told her that you like to please me. She assured me that she would be prepared and ready." "Honey, do you need anything from me in any special way?" She leaned back a little and smiled at him. "No, dear. Everything I need from you, I get right now. And when I'm in bed with you tomorrow, I know you'll get exactly what you need with Julie. It'll be awkward the first few times, we both know that." Leaning towards him, she whispered in his ear, "I can't wait to see you take my best friend, Mark. She'll love it, and I know you will too." He blushed as she giggled at his reaction. "You are unique, Katie. Unique. I love my husband, and it is my responsibility to satisfy all his needs. If I can't fulfill a need, I'll make sure I find someone who can." Later in the evening, they showered together again, and it was a repeat of the morning. He still felt as close to his wife as before, and although he took care of himself, just having her there almost made up for it. But he knew he needed more. He needed to feel her body in the most intimate way possible, but he knew he couldn't insist on it. So he accepted their agreement and decided to do whatever it took to make it work. When they returned home the next day after dropping the kids off at their morning sports practice, things were a little awkward. They exchanged smiles as usual, but the conversation was more reserved, aware of what would happen in a few hours. Mark's parents arrived to pick up the children, and the couple began preparing for the evening. The three decided to dress casually since they already knew each other, and the entire evening was pretty much planned out. This meant that Mark could wear casual jeans and a nice shirt, while Katie opted for a blouse and skirt, comfortable shoes, and lightly styled her hair with a little makeup. Mark still thought she was stunning and said more than once that she would look sexy even in a potato sack. When they went to Julie's, they held hands as usual, but the conversation remained tense. Mark admitted that he was nervous. Katie just wanted the evening to go well and hoped that her husband would get exactly what he needed. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she was worried that one of them might be hurt, and she knew it could be any of the three. When they knocked on Julie's door, she opened it and everyone exchanged smiles and pleasantries. Julie wore a beautiful dress with spaghetti straps that went down to her knees, a slight hint of cleavage. Her perfume was delicious, and they both complimented her taste. Her ex-partner looked after the children for the evening, and Mark admitted he was glad her husband had not been a close friend before their divorce. The three were clearly nervous when they arrived at the restaurant they had chosen for dinner. Katie made sure to seat Julie next to her husband. It took a few minutes before they felt comfortable. He watched his wife, allowing himself to feel a natural attraction to Julie, and she couldn't stop smiling shyly back at him. During dessert, Mark made the first move, placing his hand on her thigh. Julie looked at him and then at her best friend. "It's okay, Julie. I promise. It won't be awkward." Mark remained silent, stroking her thigh before wrapping his arms around her waist. Julie turned to receive the first kiss of the evening. He pulled away after a few seconds, seeing her embarrassed and smiling. He answered her with a smile and extended his hand to his wife so that she could hold it too. Dancing with two women at once was an unusual experience, but after he whispered in Julie's ear, Katie walked back to the table they were occupying while he continued dancing with Julie. "Awkward?" he asked. "At first, yes. Now I feel much more confident." "Me too. Are you sure about this evening?" "Mark, a couple of things. First of all, I haven't had sex in too long. Secondly, you are probably the most handsome man I know, and I am not the only woman who would like to share your bed. Third, I love Katie like a sister, and I do this for her as much as I do for you. I can't imagine how you both feel right now. I just don't want to be the reason for divorce." "You won't. I will not divorce my wife. My only concern is that it will be too difficult for her in the end." He alternated dancing with his wife and her best friend. Other men tried to dance with the one who was free. Katie would never dance with another man, whether Mark was there or not. Julie said they were now called a troika. Returning home earlier than usual, he offered them a glass of wine and they settled in for the evening. After pouring himself a strong drink with a mixer, he sat between them and the conversation became a little awkward again. All three knew why they were there, but they had to overcome the initial awkwardness. Finally, he drained his glass and kissed his wife with the passion and love he felt for her. Finally, she gently pushed him back. "Focus on Julie," she said. "I'm not going anywhere, Mark. She is here for you today, and I think for many nights to come." Turning to Julie, she gave him a shy smile, and he hugged her and kissed her. It didn't take long for them to get hot and passionate. He felt Katie's hands on him. She didn't stay away, but she soon became more distant as they moved into the bedroom. He turned again and kissed his wife several times, confessing his love to her each time. She responded with the same words before suggesting that it was time to move to the bedroom. Getting naked in front of Julie was a little nerve-wracking since he hadn't been naked in front of another woman in a long time. He received many compliments before helping Julie out of her dress. He was glad that Julie looked different in many ways. Taller, about 5'6" compared to Katie's 5'3", brunette compared to Katie's red hair, blue eyes compared to Katie's green eyes, darker skin color compared to Katie's pale, slightly freckled skin. large breasts, although he always loved his wife's small breasts. Julie was slimmer as Katie had retained some of her curves post-pregnancy. "Is she good, honey?" The two women giggled as he leaned over and kissed his wife. "Thank you for this, dear. I don't know how I can thank you enough." Looking at his beloved, Mark saw a smile in Julie's eyes. Looking at his wife, he guessed that she was going to participate in this action in her own way. The thought of his wife taking on a role in managing his mistresses made him even more excited. She became even more attractive to him. He thought about it and didn't mind if she chose who he would sleep with. This was fair, given that he would be sleeping with other women, not his wife. Helping Julie to her feet, he kissed her, and they quickly found themselves on the bed. "Do you want sex with him, Julie?" "Yes," she moaned, feeling his kisses on her body. "Will you satisfy my husband until you find your man?" "I love you, Katie. I'll do whatever you want, but I need it to." "I know what it takes, Jules. I love you too. That's why I asked you to do this for us. Make love to my girlfriend, Mark. She is ready to give you everything you need. I'll find you more lovers, dear. I know you need sex. I'm sorry I can't be that way for you." She giggled, adding, "I'll find you women." "Do you like it?" Julie moaned. "My husband looks happy, and my best friend is making love with someone she has a connection with. This is beautiful and wonderful, Jules." She leaned over and kissed her friend on the cheek. "I'm glad you're here for my husband." "Me too," Julie whispered before Mark kissed her passionately. "Take me, lover." Sleeping with two women may have been a dream for many young men. He had never been particularly interested in that kind of sex, and neither he nor his wife had ever mentioned adding another man or woman to the bed. He would certainly never suggest adding a man. It might seem hypocritical after what happened that night, but that's how he felt. Waking up together in the morning, they talked frankly over breakfast. Katie was delighted with what happened. Mark enjoyed the sex and found Julie to be a wonderful partner. Julie asked Katie when she could come visit again. Katie smiled. "Anytime, Julie. You just can't move in with us with your kids." "Will I be his only lover?" Katie shook her head. "No, because if you are with him too much, I will start to worry." Julie took her hand. "Katie, I would never. And he would never. It's not just sex. He's in love with you." "I know he's in love, but do you understand why I'm asking this?" Julie nodded immediately. "I understand, Katie, and I will never do anything that could ruin your relationship. But thank you both for last night. It was wonderful. Exactly what I needed." Mark took both women by the hands. "Katie, I love you, I married you, and we will grow old together. But Jules, last night was great, wonderful, and you were perfect. Absolutely perfect. I can't wait to be with you again. I just don't want to sound too impatient." "You have a sex drive, honey," said Katie, "and what we do will wake him up again. Don't worry about anything. This was only the first night. In the future, everything will be fine." Katie. To be honest, their sex life had always been pretty simple. She didn't often give pleasure, but sometimes she did, knowing that he liked it, and their lovemaking. Despite her lack of desire, she admitted that he always made her feel completely loved every time. Watching him take over her friend, she almost wished it would turn her on. "It's been 2 months since Julie first came to visit. Thank you for tonight, Katie. This is exactly what I needed." "Him too, Jules. I'm glad you're here again. He was like a child at Christmas. I've never done this for anyone else. I thought it would be something special because I know that after tonight." Seeing her friend start to get upset was something to be expected. She moved closer and hugged her best friend. "I'm sorry, Jules," she whispered. "I don't have anything like deep love. I love you both, Katie. You know that. But if we keep having sex, I won't be able to stop myself because I already have certain feelings." They both let out a few tears. "You are my best friend. I love you." "I love you too, Jules." Mark returned to bed and lay behind his wife, hugging her from behind while Julie snuggled up to her best friend. That's how they slept that night. Julie had arrived at their place the night before for dinner and drinks before heading to the bedroom. Katie hugged her first when she was ready to leave, and then watched as Mark hugged her tightly and Julie snuggled into his chest with a smile, but her tears on her cheeks did not go unnoticed. Katie knew Julie wasn't lying when she said she was getting attached. It would be best if she found herself a man. She didn't mean to cut her friend off completely. Julie needed love, just like her husband, but if Mark had a choice, Katie knew he would have made what could have been a huge sacrifice to stay with his wife. But Katie would admit that she would never accept it. The following weekend, Mark stayed home with the kids while Katie went across town to visit her sister. Charlotte was 5 years younger than her, and they did not look alike at all. Charlotte had blonde hair, brown eyes, large breasts, and was almost 5 feet 9 inches tall. Her sister was also single, without children. Never been married, she was engaged twice. The first groom cheated on her with a work colleague. The second groom simply ran away 3 months before the wedding. Despite the 5-year age difference, the sisters had always been close, and Katie had always been a shoulder to lean on when her sister was stressing over her failed engagements. After the last breakup, Charlotte almost never dated men, focusing on her career. Katie didn't ask too many questions about what her sister was doing in her personal life, whether she was interested in new relationships or was simply avoiding them. "How are things at home?" asked Charlotte. Katie recalled that although she told her sister about her sexual orientation, or rather, her lack of sexual interest and desire, she did not go into detail. She mentioned that she might invite another woman into their marital bed to satisfy her husband's needs, but only her friends knew more details, since everyone knew Julie, and it was already known that she now shared their bed several times a week. Mark said he doesn't discuss this with his friends. Katie admitted that she and Julie did talk about it, simply because her other friends were curious and Katie enjoyed listening to Julie lovingly talk about how Mark felt about her. "Lottie, you know how I told you a few months ago that I'm asexual?" "Yes, I studied it a little. You're seriously not attracted." "No, that's not true," she interrupted, and then immediately apologized. "I'm still in love with Mark just like 6 months ago, just like on our wedding day. I just have no sexual desire at all. Yes, I read that this can also happen. So you don't want to have sex with anyone." Katie laughed. "Believe me, my friends tried to test me. They named all these guys for whom I would have to immediately take off my panties. Nothing. Zero. No interest. Mark still takes care of me and gives me all the love I need, and although it's partly physical, we don't have actual sex anymore." Charlotte took a sip of her drink, clearly contemplating her next words. "How does he even stand it? I mean, he's a handsome 40-year-old man. I know that all your friends like him, even the married ones. Damn, I've always had a little crush on him, but every time the family gets together, I see his eyes only looking at you. Do you want to sleep with him?" The question was asked so straightforwardly that it was not surprising that her sister almost choked and started coughing. "What? Are you serious?" Taking a deep breath, Katie began to explain the details of what was currently going on in their lives. The months of therapy she went through to understand herself. The therapy she went through with Mark. An agreement they made regarding their sex life, or lack thereof, going forward, but also an agreement that they would decide together who to invite into their bedroom. "Charlotte," she said, using her full name to make it clear she was serious. "There are very few people on this planet I trust and love more than you. I also know that you have experienced more than your share of heartbreaks. I have seen Mark make love to Julie every time, and she has now become an incredibly confident woman, and I can only hope that she meets a man who makes her as happy as she was with my husband. I want you to share my husband for a long time." "Are you serious?" "Quite seriously. Mark will never leave me, I know that. He certainly won't leave me for my sister. This is not a criticism of you. This is a measure of his honesty, and I know that you would never do anything to harm our marriage. But you want me to have sex with him." "I'm asking if you want to have sex with him." "We'll do it the first time the same way we did with Julie. We'll have our date on Friday night. He will spend the entire evening making me feel nothing but love and adoration, as he does every day of our marriage. On Saturday evening, you will join us for a date. We'll eat, laugh, drink, dance, or do whatever comes into our heads, and then we'll come home and you'll make love to him while I watch. Will you watch your husband make love? I love looking at this because I know and see the joy that my husband experiences. He gets what I can no longer give him. I just don't want to be in Julie's shoes, but trust me, my husband knows how to please a woman. She saw her sister's cheeks begin to turn red. Squeezing her hand, she added, I'm not expecting an answer right now, but I want you to seriously think about it. What will Mark think? He will seriously think. And you don't mind. Julie was the first because she is my best friend. I love and trust her. She was lonely and needed love. I'm asking you because you are all this, plus my sister. Will you tell our parents about this? Probably. I don't want them to hear that Mark is sleeping with my sister without knowing why. And you will always be present. Yes. And I know that Mark would never, and I mean never, do anything close to cheating. But in a sense, I control his sex life. She watched as her sister downed her glass of wine. So how often? It's difficult with children. Chloe may be old enough to understand, but Charlie probably isn't. And neither of them wants to hear about their parents' sex lives, so we do our best to make sure they don't know. They began to spend more time with their grandparents or stay with friends for sleepovers. Charlotte took a deep breath. I really need to have sex, Katie. Yes, hell yes. But it's not just that. I want to help my sister and her husband. This weekend? Charlotte blushed, smiled, but nodded. Fine. I'll tell Mark, and I think he'll be delighted. Returning home after a couple of glasses of wine with her sister, she waited until the children were asleep and, taking Mark by the hand, led him to the bedroom. When they were undressed and in bed, she told him that her sister was interested in being his partner. He admitted that he was a little surprised, more because Katie agreed to this than because of her sister herself. Are you sure this is okay for you? He asked, clearly needing reassurance. I love my sister, dear, and her heart has been broken more than once. She needs a good man who will give her love. Fine. Next weekend. Yes. Date on Friday. Certainly. I love you, darling. She clung to him, as always. I love you too, honey. Charlotte came twice during the week, which was unusual, but their children were glad to see their aunt. Katie also made sure that Mark and her sister spent some time together, being in the kitchen and sometimes eavesdropping on their conversations, but nothing physical ever happened between them. Charlotte was interested in his reaction to everything that was happening, trying to better understand their agreement from his point of view, asking questions about his sexual relationship with Julie and what expectations he might have from her. On Friday evening, there was a date with her husband. They did something new. They had dinner and then went to the cinema. Acted like teenagers, spending most of the movie kissing. She sensed his hesitation as he wanted to touch her, so she grabbed his wrist and placed his hand on her chest. It's okay, honey, she whispered. We're just playing here. I think we really met in our early 20s and missed out on that aspect of dating at a younger age. Later, while cuddling with him in bed, she felt his hands on her breasts, and it felt really good, but she noticed that he didn't try to touch her in other places. If she had given the signal, he would have quickly raised his hand under her dress. Darling, she whispered. Yes, dear, she heard his half-asleep voice. Would you like something with me? She giggled as he seemed surprised by the question. Of course, dear. Did you hold back in the cinema? Of course, because, well, I didn't know how far you'd let me go. But I would definitely touch you if you gave me the signal. Turning, she kissed him tenderly and pressed herself against his chest again. Sorry if I'm sending mixed signals, honey. I don't want this. Everything is fine. But you will have to be specific with me if you want to give yourself to me. I just live with the assumption that this part of our lives is now completely out of the picture. I had no desire, but I thought it would be nice to be intimate so that you could enjoy time with me. But I just couldn't. She felt him hug her tighter, gently reassuring her. Don't force yourself, he said softly, with a soothing intonation in his voice. We lie in bed together, cuddle, and I just love the feeling of your body next to mine. The next evening, the parents took the children back to their place. They are already used to being sent to their grandparents or for sleepovers with friends. Both parents would have liked to explain to the children what was going on, but they were still perhaps too young to understand. Charlotte arrived at their house late in the evening, after the children had already been taken away. Katie opened the door and hugged her sister tightly, thanking her for coming. Mark waited nearby, smiling at both women, and also hugged Charlotte. Katie saw how her sister reacted to this hug. She practically melted in his arms. Her husband was just such a person. Charlotte admitted that she always had a little crush on her husband. Katie never worried about it because she knew more than one woman found him attractive. The dinner passed in a relaxed atmosphere. The conversation flowed easily. Katie had a glass or two of wine, but noticed that her sister was only drinking water and Mark was sipping a can of soda. His gaze constantly moved from one woman to another. He never admitted that he was attracted to her sister, but Katie knew that her husband was not blind. After they cleaned up the kitchen, the three settled down in the living room, Mark sitting in the center as usual. Katie watched with a smile as her sister hesitated briefly before sitting on his lap, looking into his eyes. No one said anything before she kissed him. Even Katie had to admit that the kiss was quite passionate, at least on Charlotte's part. "Is this what you need?" she asked, and Charlotte nodded before continuing the kiss. Charlotte needed to be loved. She's been alone for too long. And to be honest, lonely. Her heart was broken twice. Katie knew that she needed her husband more than anything in the world. "Honey, let's take her to our bedroom so you can make love to her." He easily carried her sister into their bedroom. Laying her down on the bed, Katie took off her clothes and joined them as he moved down her body to pleasure her. Taking her hand, Charlotte looked into her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I love you, Lottie. I think I have found the right love for you." "Do you mean?" "We'll talk about this later. For now, just enjoy." Watching her husband pleasure her sister, Katie lay next to them, lost in thought. Watching him be with Julie was wonderful, but sometimes it was hard. She knew that her husband simply enjoyed intimacy and, of course, sex, but when he was with her, there was no love. Her sister was destroyed twice. She needed a good man. Watching her husband make love to her sister, Katie didn't feel the least bit jealous. On the contrary, she felt only happiness for her sister, and it was obvious that her husband was enjoying the process too. Lying later on her back, Katie cuddled up to one side of her husband and her sister to the other. They both gently stroked his chest until Charlotte took her hand. "Thank you, Katie," she whispered. "Did you like it today? I haven't felt so loved in a long time. I'm glad you were here too. It wasn't strange. On the contrary, I felt better knowing that you were there and shared this feeling of love." The next morning, there was no awkwardness. Mark continued to show love and care for both his wife and her sister. He was in such a joyful mood that he finally suggested that we get ready and go pick up the kids for a family dinner. Fortunately, the children did not notice anything unusual, such as the shy smiles and glances that Charlotte and Mark exchanged. Although it all came mainly from Charlotte, it was clear that she was now completely infatuated with Mark, and Katie was again surprised that she did not feel jealous. She wanted her sister to be happy, and if her husband could give her that happiness, then that was even better. Late that evening, after Charlotte had gone home and the children were already asleep, Katie sat down with her husband in the living room. "Darling, what do you think about my sister?" "She's wonderful. I've always loved your sister, honey. Although, to be honest, I have always loved your family. Never had any problems with them." She pressed herself even closer to him, taking a deep breath. "I'm still completely in love with you, honey. But I also love my sister and want her to be happy. And there's a part of me that thinks we can both help her find that happiness. Her heart was broken twice by the men who were supposed to love her. I think that you can be the man who will give her the love she deserves." He hugged her tighter again, and she felt his tension. "What are you suggesting, Catherine?" Again, the full name is a sign that this is a serious conversation. "I'm not sure, but I saw how much she enjoyed herself last night. You made her feel loved and wonderful, and I want her to feel that way forever." He thought again. "I thought you said." It's different when it comes to my sister, honey. Besides you and my parents, there is no one in the world whom I love and trust more, and I can't stand the thought of her meeting someone again who will break her heart again. You are a reliable option for her. She smiled, seeing how funny he found the remark. Let's continue to discuss this, dear. There is no need to rush into decisions. Do you still want to have fun with Julie? If it suits you. We make decisions together, but I will only be with someone with your approval, and I know Julie is starting to develop feelings, which makes the situation awkward because she knows I won't leave you. Julie hasn't been with them for over a week. Katie and Mark texted her constantly, and Katie called her at least once every 2 days. She met up with Julie on Wednesday night and was pleased that there was no awkwardness despite how their last meeting had ended. After a couple of drinks, she moved closer to her friend and explained what was happening to her sister. But you still want to have some fun? She asked. Yes, but I will start looking for a man for a serious relationship, Katie. I get attached, and that's not good for all of us. But until I start dating someone else, I'd like to just have fun with him. Fine. Do you want to come over tonight? With pleasure. In the next 6 months, her husband had more sex than he probably had in the last 6 years. Julie had been a part of their lives for 4 of those months, coming once or twice a week for nothing more than hot and passionate sex, which they both found very enjoyable. But she met a man she hoped to build a relationship with, and to her credit, she immediately talked to Katie when he asked her out. This left Charlotte, and 6 months later Katie sat down with her husband one evening over a glass of wine and poured him a bottle of beer. The children were in their rooms, already accustomed to the frequent visits of Aunt Charlotte, who came 3 or 4 times a week. Taking their hands, she smiled at them both before starting a conversation. She put it all very simply. I want this to become permanent if you both can handle it. Mark, Julie is now in a relationship and hasn't been with us for a couple of months. I can imagine 2 more women who could be a part of this, but to be honest, I really like what we have between the 3 of us right now. Are you sure? Asked Charlotte. Chloe is already an adult. She is already talking about university and what she will do. If and when she moves out, I'd like you to move in with us. The only question I have to ask is, you are already 36 years old. Do you want children? What? Mark was clearly surprised by the question. Honey, I'm not sure. I have to ask this, honey. If she wants kids, then it won't work. You know I'm on birth control, Katie, and I have no desire to have children. To avoid problems, I might even have surgery to prevent pregnancy. I'm focused on my career and enjoying my time with you too. Were you looking for another man? Honestly, no. I get everything I need from Mark. I thought it would get weird over time, but instead I feel closer to you every time, and Mark gives me almost as much love as he gives his wife. Fine. Don't make a decision right now, Lottie. There may be a man out there who is made just for you, but I agree that I have never felt so close to you, and watching you with Mark brings me so much joy emotionally and psychologically, knowing that my husband is just as loved and sexually satisfied as can be. Turning to her husband, she added, This is also your decision, dear. I would choose Charlotte over any other woman, my dear. I love and trust her as my sister-in-law and as a close friend. If you are happy with this device, and if she wants to join us full-time, I think that would be great for the 3 of us. Lottie, can I think about it? This is a serious decision. Certainly. Take as much time as you need. It is not surprising that Charlotte took a couple of weeks to think and did not come during this time. Mark understood everything and never made any problems about it. This time gave the couple the opportunity to fully focus on each other. Charlotte showed up on their doorstep on Tuesday evening. As soon as Katie opened the door, her sister ran into her arms, hugging her tightly and telling her over and over how much she loved them and that she wanted to be a part of their lives. Katie hugged her back just as tightly and assured her that everything would be fine in the future. Charlotte continued to be a constant part of their lives over the next few years. Friday night was always date night for Katie and Mark. They still enjoyed every day they spent together, raising children, running a household, and spending those nights in bed together when no one else came to visit, hugging and kissing, assuring each other that no matter what, love the one they share will last forever. Over time, everyone learned about their unique relationship. The trio didn't hide it, but they didn't tell everyone what exactly was going on. Katie's parents were somewhat stunned to learn that both sisters shared the same man, but after seeing the love that united the three of them, they accepted it. Mark's parents weren't too worried about it either. They only asked to make sure everyone was happy. Chloe moved out of home during her second year at university, choosing to live with friends in an apartment closer to campus. By this time, the children already knew about the unusual structure of the family. Chloe even joked that her room could become a guest bedroom for Aunt Charlotte when she wants to stay the night. This was said with a meaningful smile, and everyone understood that Charlotte would not spend a single night in this bedroom alone. Charlotte moved in a week after Chloe left. Most of her belongings did end up in the guest bedroom, but she slept with her husband and sister every night. She didn't have sex with Mark every night. Apparently, they bought a larger bed before Charlotte moved in. Their son Charlie also moved out a couple of years after his sister, leaving Mark to live with his wife and his wife's sister. The three were surprised at how natural it all became, and Katie was the first to say that Mark now had two wives. She still had no sexual desire, but she never spent the night away from her husband. With the children leaving home, the trio began to enjoy life as empty nesters. They often spent weekends outside the city and vacationed on the coast. Once a year, they went on a cruise. Over time, Charlotte admitted that she also fell in love with Mark. Katie assured her that she had known this for a long time and had expected it. Most importantly, Charlotte was her sister, she loved her, and their device worked, continued to work, and would only stop if Charlotte herself wanted it. But this did not happen. Charlotte stayed, and their union continued to flourish. Mark was known in the area as a man with two wives, but no one was rude or vulgar about it. Katie was still as much in love with her husband after 25 years of marriage as she was the day they exchanged vows. Charlotte wore the ring on her left hand, on her third finger, symbolizing her commitment to the couple. The trio were now retired and leading a quiet life, contemplating a move to the coast to escape the hustle and bustle. Mark sometimes admitted that he was surprised at how well their agreement worked. Charlotte has never been happier, admitting that although things were awkward at first, she has spent the last few decades in a loving relationship with two people. As for Katie, she always clung to her husband. His hair was now a noble gray and silver color, and still felt the love that came from him. She never doubted how much he loved her, always loved her, and would love her until one of them was buried. When she told him her secret all those years ago, she was afraid that things might go wrong and she would lose him. Instead, she felt his love every day. His devotion to her was never in doubt. They had a unique and even unusual lifestyle for the past 2 decades, but she wouldn't change a thing. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.